Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is BC Echohawk. I'm a member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, and this event is being sponsored by the First Nations Film and Video Festival. We appreciate you joining us. Our fall festival is coming up here November 1st, November 3rd through 7th, and November 9th. It's going to be a bit of a hybrid between live events, in-person events, and virtual events. So we hope if you have an opportunity, if you're in the Chicago area, you'll go to the live event. If not, check us out online. So today's conversation is going to be with our women filmmakers, the other 51% Indigenous women in film. And we appreciate our guests for joining us. Today, we're going to be speaking with Michelle Hernandez, Ramona Emerson, Pamela Peters, and Sarah Hennigan. So to start us out, I would really appreciate it, ladies, if each of you would introduce yourself, and we'll go ahead and start with Michelle.
Hello, Diectors, Michelle Hernandez. Hi, my name is Michelle Hernandez. I am a Wiyot tribal member from my father's side and Mayan from my mother's. I've been a filmmaker for about 10 years, and I run a production company with my partner called Sugar Bush Hill.
Thank you, Michelle. So next, Ramona.
Ramona Emerson in Chair, Plashi in Shle, Nakadine Bushes Chi, Kachina just Chair, and Nakadine Dishanella. Hello, my name is Ramona Emerson. I am a Dene filmmaker from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm originally from Tohatchi, New Mexico, on the northern side of the Navajo Reservation. I have been making films for over 25 years, and I own a production company in Albuquerque, New Mexico with my husband, Kelly Byers, called Real Indian Pictures, and we do mostly documentary work, and we have several clients that we work for. Thank you for inviting me today.
Well, thank you for joining us, Ramona. Next up is Pamela.
Yat Pamela Peters in Chia, Tkachini Nislo, Ashti Bashis Chen, Tohadlini Dashiche, Ado Kilistini Dashanelek, Aganazahishle. I'm Pamela J. Peters. I am Navajo, was born and raised on the Navajo Nation, grew up around Shiprock. My family's from Red Valley, Arizona, and I reside here in Los Angeles. I call myself a multimedia artist. I do short filmmaking, but I also do, I also work with photography, and I'm a writer and also a poet, and just kind of doing a collection of everything, trying to really document the experience of natives coming to urban establishments. And that's pretty much what the body of work that I do here in Los Angeles. And I live here in Los Angeles on Tongva land on Tovangar.
Great. Thank you very much, Pamela. Last and certainly not least, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Hennigan, and I am Cherokee and Irish. I grew up kind of all over the country, mostly in Texas and California, though. And I am primarily a cinematographer, and I work with mostly women of color. And then I also write and direct my own work, which is usually about multiculturalism and kind of cross-genre examination of that. And I am also an assistant professor at the University of Mississippi in film production.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So we wanted to chat with you ladies as working members of the film industry about, we'll start with a big picture overview of the state of Native women representation in media. We're certainly recently seeing a lot of Native projects coming to fruition, what with the Rutherford Falls Project, Reservation Dogs, and other things that seem to be becoming being produced right now. So again, I'm going to ask you each, maybe Michelle, if you want to start out and let us know, your thoughts on what's going on these days in film production and how it's affecting Native women, Indigenous women.
So I think it's a little better than when film first started out. I think when film first started out, it was a lot of stereotypes. I do feel there's better representation for us as Native women. but I feel like it could be better. And I feel like there should be more opportunities for us to present these stories. And I do see that it's going to happen. I feel with us and the people who are in this panel, we're going to make those opportunities happen. I think a lot right now, the industry, this as kind of a corporate thing. I don't know if any of you guys feel that way. Is diversity is kind of what's making them money. It's not really trying to represent us. It's just trying to kind of be a part of what is in the trend that's in. I just had this conversation with someone else. Again, I think as independent filmmakers, we're going to change that, and we're going to make our voice heard by creating more content that represents us, even when we're not marketable.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that I've always noted is that I'm surprised that there isn't more Native representation overall in the film industry, just because storytelling is such a natural part of Native tradition. And, you know, the fact that that's what we do to teach, you know, that's how we pass on our traditions and culture. I've always felt like it should be a bigger, of more interest to people. And, you know, I'm not saying it isn't, in fact, but maybe the opportunity just hasn't been there to share it. So Ramona, your thoughts?
Well, when I was first starting out, I can definitely say I could not name a woman who was a Native woman that was making films when I was just starting out. I think the one film that had come out at that time was Surviving Columbus, and Diane Reyna had been involved with that. And I remember when I was a young filmmaker, I tried to talk to her about what it was like being a filmmaker, because I really wanted to go into that. And she just seemed exhausted, you know, like she didn't even feel like talking to me about it. And I should have taken that as a huge cue, because I think in the 25 plus years that I've worked in the industry, it has been a constant battle to prove myself. I think we constantly have to prove ourselves, to prove that we can do the work. I have been on set with crews who are working on our films that question the camera choice I'm making, or question the shot I want to do, or it's like they don't think that I have the capacity to know what I want as a filmmaker and as a woman. And I think when I was younger, I used to kind of let that happen. And I would say, yeah, you know, I understand what you're saying, but just do what I'm asking. I think I'm a lot less forgiving now. And a lot of the time, I think that's why we just do all the work ourselves, because I am so tired of being second guessed on set. I am tired of just being questioned constantly about my, you know, my own thoughts, my own imagery, what I want to do on this film. So my husband and I do all the work now, and I think that's why. We run cameras, we do the editing, we do everything, because I just get tired of explaining my vision to people sometimes. And it's weird, and explaining the fact that I could do it, and they don't believe. So you just say, well, just give me the camera and you go do what you're going to do, and I'm going to go film what I just asked you to film a week. So it just, I think as a woman, as a woman filmmaker, you really have to be more assertive than any other. I mean, these questions don't get asked of male filmmakers. I'm sorry, but they don't. They are not questioned. Their artistic choices are not second guessed. And I think that's just a direct correlation with how the film industry is. The film industry is a male-dominated industry. The crews that come to work on your work are mostly male. The producers, the money people, are male. You know, and it's a difficult industry to be in as a woman, because it's just I feel like I work harder to prove myself than I work on the film. And it's not just being a woman, it's also being a Native person. And people will question your storytelling choices, people will question your story structures, people will question what you're filming, why you're doing this, what's the problem, what's the point. So I just think that it's, now I understand why Diane Reyna was so exhausted.
Yeah.
You know, I get it now that I'm almost 30 years into it. I'm like, I get it. Like, I don't even, like, after you work on a film for 5 years, sorry, but you just don't want to deal with it. You don't want to talk to people about it. You don't want to promote it. Like it gets to the point where you're just so exhausted working on your films that it's hard to keep the momentum going, keep your passion going, wanting to make another film. So it's changing, but not fast enough. And the only way we're going to change it is to get more women in the industry. And so my way of doing that is to make sure that all of our interns are young women, making sure that there's always a young woman who's there to intern with me, to help me, to maybe look at the edit. And I pay interns. Like, you don't hire a young Native woman and expect her to come work for you for 16 hours for free. You know, you pay them and you feed them and you do whatever you need to do for them. So that's just like, that is just the basic things that you can do to be a better human in the film industry and to kind of tackle that whole issue of inequality as far as women on set, as far as women storytellers.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Pamela?
That's my dog. We just had a fire truck drive by.
Okay. And he's imitating it? That's what it sounded like. Oh, poor little guy. I say guy, could be a little.
All right. Sorry about that. Right when you said that, the fire truck just drove by and I was like, uh-oh, he's going to start howling. Sure enough, he did. You know, I really want to feel optimistic and saying, hey, there's a lot of good changes happening, but the reality, it's happening at a small rate. And I'm really frustrated, and I think just because I'm so much older, and I've heard many women that have talked about how they felt in the industry. It's very difficult, and I think that's why I have a lot of stories I want to tell. And for so long, I tried to like find funding for it and trying to do it on a large scale. And then I just like ended up wanting to continue. That passion of storytelling was there. So I downscaled it and I started doing these short films, and I would do my own fundraising. And there were still stories I wanted to continue to tell. And I think that's why I spread it out, and I started doing photography, and I started doing storytelling through my photography as well. And that was another way I could do storytelling. I don't really want to say that I'm like a full like filmmaker. I feel like more I'm a storyteller, and I just do it in these different avenues through filmmaking. I do vignettes of video storytelling. I do photography. I worked in the film industry when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, and for, you know, large studios as a production assistant, and I could never move up. And it was very difficult for me because I felt that it was because of who I was as a Native woman. And I was always looked over. And I remember when there was a mentoring program happening, and I was like really looking forward to this project to like move up when I was like about 24, 25. And I worked hard to work with, you know, our first AD, and she really wanted me. But it was the fact of understanding how the film industry is, and it's all based on nepotism. And so this young girl, white girl, got in because her uncle was in film. And it was a friend of a friend, but I was the one working hard. And that's always going to happen. And it still continues today. And it's just really hard for us as Native women to really move up unless I feel like all of us, our desires there to be natural storytellers. So we are storytellers, and we're doing the stories on our own in this independent platform. But it's really hard for us to really share our stories on a larger platform, like a network scale. But I'm hoping the new programs that are coming up, I'm not too optimistic because I feel like it's a group of people that are able to tell stories in that platform. But I do wish them well. I do hope that they are able to give opportunities to new storytellers to tell their stories on a larger scale. But I try to be optimistic, but the reality is it's just going to be very slow.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to echo a lot of what my colleagues have said. And I think, one of the things that everybody has mentioned this, kind of pushing towards independent cinema out of a frustration of being able to tell our stories otherwise. And that was certainly the same for myself. I worked primarily under the line as like a camera assistant and other similar roles when I was younger. And because I'm mixed and white passing, most of the time that meant complete erasure. And it just was an inappropriate place to talk about that. And so, that is kind of a big reason that I was pushed towards independent cinema. And I personally went to grad school to help hone that for me. And then found in grad school, even though, it is a largely supportive place, as soon as I mentioned, like Ramona said, a story structure that reflected a Native perspective, all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, you can do what you want, but you're not really going to have any support doing that. There's nobody that can guide you through that or talk to you about it. So good luck. And that kind of remained true throughout grad school. And then, on the real world, as we start to make more of our own films. And, to the other point that Ramona brought up as well, being in camera department inherently is one of the most male dominated parts of our business. And there's this one story that I always tell because it stuck with me when I was, I think I was probably 26, somewhere around there. I was on a really, really big camera crew for a really, really big company. I think there were probably 15 of us on the crew. And I was the only woman and the only person of color. And at lunch, as usual, we were all just sitting around talking about life and things. And the guys who were in charge of us, he was like, okay, why doesn't everybody give us what's next on the agenda? And everybody's going around. And literally, as it got to me, the man looked at me, looked to my right, and completely skipped over my answer. And it was one of those situations where I was young and I didn't want to lose the job, so I didn't say anything. And it took a while to process, that had even happened and why it happened. And I think that, even though we're getting better, there's still a lot of that kind of an environment being created. And so it's not necessarily encouraging for young Native women to walk into that. And so, like everybody mentioned, for me, it's, part of why I'm a professor as well, is really important that we are creating ourselves spaces for future filmmakers to feel like they can be a part of the story, no matter what position they want to find themselves in. Even if they don't want to be a key creative, they just love movies and they want to be part of that, but they don't feel like there's a place that makes sense for them.
Yeah, thank you. That reminds me of, I was a camera assistant for about 10 or so years, 10 to 12 years during my days living in LA. I was started out as a loader, of course, and moved up to a second. And that's where I wanted to be. That was fine with me. I didn't need to be a first or an operator, and actually certainly wasn't looking to be a DP. It's a very difficult job. But the one thing I had to learn was to be loud, because that is something that I think I certainly grew up, for all intents and purposes, being told not to be loud. And when they were asking for a lens change or things like that, and you have to yell it back out to let them know, you heard them, that was a very hard thing for me to do. And I think back now, it's like all I had to do was yell out, 35 loud. And yet that was very difficult to learn how to do, much less kind of defend yourself as things are happening around you. So yeah, I certainly appreciate that. So I want to ask about maybe mentors that you have had, though. Before I began my years in LA, or my years in the film business, I knew I wanted to work in film, and I had gone to the film festival in Toronto, the Toronto Film Festival. And by sheer chance, I was able to meet Alanisa Bonzawan, who has done a number of documentaries through the Canadian Broadcast Network there, and was actually being honored that year for her work. And she talked to me and gave me helpful advice and things that she went through in making her films. At that point, she was well into her career and had several successful documentaries that had been shown down here as well. And so who are people that maybe you were able to meet that inspired you in your work, or continue to inspire you in your work? Michelle?
So I haven't really met the people that have kind of met or launched my interest in film. I think a lot of the support that I've gotten, I don't really have a film mentor, which if anyone knows, I'm looking for one. But the way I see it is I've surrounded myself with support. So a lot of the people who've supported me have been my family and my community. A lot of them don't understand what film is, but they know that it's a essential tool to tell stories, and we have a lot of storytellers in our community. So they've guided me in that way. But yeah, it's been a lot of support from my community. Or the reason why I've been making films, they're the reasons why I have a lot of my films funded, is because I reach out to them. And I think the other thing is I'm learning in this industry, I now live in Los Angeles, is that you shouldn't really idolize people, because when you do meet them or you learn something about them, that kind of changes the perspective. I recently had an internship where someone kind of put in a great perspective for me. They said that people are your colleagues. They may get paid more than you, they may have a higher status than you, but you all do the same thing and understand how it works. And so when I learned that, it kind of snapped me out of, all these movie stars, all these higher directors. I'm like, no, I have the skills that they have. I just unfortunately had to find a way in there where, like a lot of my colleagues have mentioned, it's really hard to get in there. I feel like there's like this little Rolodex of certain people and certain groups who are getting all this work, which again, they're all very talented. But what I have learned is to surround myself with colleagues who will support me. And that's the thing, is working in this industry, I first started as a grip when I moved into LA. And like a lot of my colleagues have mentioned, because I'm a female, I had one comment say, "Oh, that's cute, you're a grip." And I didn't really know how to respond to that. And I was like, I can do what you can do. And so that made me realize, again, I need to be careful who I surround myself with. And so a lot of people I work with, I constantly bring on projects. I've just met, I brought one of my friends on, who's a talented stop motion animator, and I've been wanting to bring her, and I've switched this role of being friends to mentor, because again, she's learning how to be a filmmaker. So that's been really cool to watch her grow. But I also know that she has the skills and capability to be a brilliant filmmaker, and it's my, job to guide her. But again, like I mentioned, is finding the support who will support you and not look down on you, who want to bring you on board. So for me, I'm working on future projects, and I can think of, she's my co-director now, but I want to bring her on other projects, and the other friends and colleagues I've surrounded myself, I want to continue to work with them. And I think that's the way it's going to work, is that we bring each other on board. We impress each other. We know we work well, and that's how we're going to find our way in. Again, it's really hard to break in this industry, and I live in Los Angeles, and I'm just like tired. I think the first 3 years I was here, I was like, I'm just going to make my own independent stuff. So that's kind of, my advice about mentorship and how it works. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I just went on a tangent.
No, that's okay. It's all interesting. Ramona?
Well, I can't say, I can't really say that I had any mentors, at least in the film industry. I feel like a lot of my colleagues I respect their work, and I respect, you know, all the work that they do, as well as they are also independent filmmakers like Melissa Henry, like Anna Becker, like a lot of these Navajo filmmakers that in Black Horse Low, like we all kind of came into filmmaking. I mean, I'm a little older than all of them, so I was making films and then I was watching them also make films, and I think like Nona Butt was one of the curators on the first film festival in New York, the Native American Film and Video Festival. I miss that film festival. So I just feel like same deal. Like I don't have so much of a mentor. I just have colleagues that we've all kind of come up and progressed our work together. And we're all from this community, and our films are all completely different, and they all have completely different you know, viewpoints. And I think that's just really interesting to be able to have that network of people that we can call and talk to and say, and we all know, like, we all know the same gatekeepers. We all know who we're applying to. We know who's holding the purse strings, and we know that they're all full of crap sometimes. And that, like Pamela says, it's all who you know. Like, it's only their buddies that are going to get that grant. You can apply to it 30 times and you're never going to get it. You know why? Because you're not their buddy. Or, you know, or you're not cute, or you're not hip, or whatever it is that they're, so yeah, it's a fickle industry, right? So like, but as far as mentors, never had one. I really, Mara Tamita was one of the filmmakers that I guess idolized, because I respected the fact that she just went out there and made films, regardless of whether, I mean, she had the support of the New Zealand government, and, you know, they have the film industry there, they support her. So they were supporting a lot of her documentaries, but she just went out and did it. She edited it, she filmed it, she went out and did these sometimes shocking documentaries. And so for me, I admired that. And when I first got into the Sundance Native Lab, she was going to be my mentor. And I was so excited about that, because even though we were working on a narrative project at the time, I really wanted to talk to her about her documentary work. And unfortunately, she got sick and passed away like right after she got sick and wasn't able to be my mentor at the Filmmakers Lab. And then, you know, after that, she passed away. So I never had a chance to meet her, and I wish I had, because I would have loved to have talked to her about her work and about how she persevered through a lot of the stuff that she had to go through as a mom, as a filmmaker. So, you know, I'm upset that I didn't get to meet her. But as far as building community, I think that's really important. Like I say, we're talking with other filmmakers, but I found that the most welcoming and important relationships that I've made have been at the WGH Producers Academy. And all the documentary filmmakers that came out of that academy, I think there were 14 of us, have all kept in touch. That was in like, golly, 2007, 2008. And we all still keep in touch with each other. We give each other jobs. If we find grants, we send it to each other. We still meet on occasion, like once a year we'll have a Zoom meeting, or we'll all talk together and we'll talk about what we're working on. And I was the only Native in that group. I don't find that kind of connection with other Native filmmakers, at least documentary filmmakers. I just don't think we just haven't reached out and done that. But that community of filmmakers, through the documentary community that I have met from this country, from other countries, have been the most supportive group of women, mostly women. There's a lot of women in documentary film. So that has been important to me. That is the community that I've continued to work and thrive on, and continue to keep my the community of local filmmakers and filmmakers that have been working together for years. You know, we still keep in touch. We still network with each other. We still work with each other, and that's important, I think.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you, Pamela.
Okay, he's not howling anymore. Mentors, you know, throughout the years, I'm lucky that I've connected with some producers that I can go to and, you know, ask them for some guidance, ask them to read my script, which is a big thing, because reading someone's script, taking that time and giving notes is a lot.
Yeah.
Because I do that for other people and I get paid for it. And the fact that these are well-known producers that will do that for me, and I don't have to pay them, and they will give me really great feedback, and I really am happy and fortunate enough that I have that. I guess just having that at this moment is good. It's supported me in a lot of ways and helping me continue being creative. I think for the last year and a half, a lot has happened, and I've kind of taken a break with my creative mind, just because I've had a lot of things happen in my family. Then COVID happened, and then I had to take a different job. Going through some mental health issues and going through some physical issues. And so it's really nice to have people that, it's a small group of people that I can talk to and like help me get through this. I wish there was more movement that would happen with my ideas of projects that I want to do. I don't know if it's going to go forward. I'm hoping they do, but I really wish there was a stronger support system with Native women, and we could help and support each other. I don't think there's a group out there as of yet. I am able to talk to some of artist friends that are kind of, I guess, a support system that I have. And that's helped me a lot. I mean, I have a friend who is a visual artist that I was able to like sit down with her and talk with her for about 2 hours. And she's helped me with some guidance of like how I need to really get myself back out there and be more creative and kind of get out of a slump that I'm in right now. And I think we all go through that, especially as independent filmmakers. There's times where we just are exhausted. We're just like, I need a break. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of at that point. I'm trying to get back up there. I'll eventually get there, I hope. But yeah. Mentors, I think there's just a few people that I have, and they've been with me for the last like 10, 20 years.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna sound a little bit like a broken record, but it's very similar for me. I don't necessarily think that I have any Native women filmmaking mentors specifically. I definitely have more experienced filmmakers that I look up to, but again, mostly it's my colleagues that I try to find support and inspiration from, kind of on the daily. And again, like everyone said, that's unfortunately not very many other Native women. I've been able to meet a lot through, events like this, right? Other festivals where we get together and talk to each other. But often, those relationships are many thousands of miles away from each other, and we don't get to collaborate all that often. I also have some really close collaborators from grad school, and particularly in those communities. Like, I work with a bunch of queer directors. I also work with a lot of Black directors, and all of those points of intersectionality, I do think we find in each other the ability to support one another, kind of as a larger community of people who are not represented well in film. And so that really keeps me going a lot, kind of on a day-to-day basis as an independent filmmaker, at least.
Well, that's a good place to at least start, and then who knows what's to come in the future of in terms of a group of Native women supporting each other. But that makes me think of something else. And Pamela, you mentioned you have story ideas and so on. And I know when I lived in LA, people kept their ideas very close to the vest, because they didn't want someone else taking your idea. And it's a very real thing you have to consider when you're out there sharing your original thoughts. And I met a gentleman who actually said he was writing a screenplay and said, I feel like if I even say it out loud, I'm putting it out in the ether for other people to, to develop. And we've all seen these times when, 2 or 3 versions of the same story will appear. How do you deal with that? What are your thoughts about that? I could see there might be some hesitancy to share your original work. I'll go ahead and toss it to Michelle first. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's actually really scary. There's like a lot of programs that you can apply to and they want scripts. I just applied to one, but I get really hesitant because like I try to read the fine lines and they'll be like, well, if there's something that similar comes up, you can't get us in trouble. So it gets really scary to like share your stuff. So I don't often do it. The only people I do share is with my partner and then my 2 writing buddies that we meet together because again, we're comfortable enough to share. But when it comes to funding, you're going to have to do those things and it gets scary because I'm like, do I have to copyright this? How do I go about like what are the like copyright laws to it? And then we, in Hollywood or in this industry, a lot of stories are very similar too. So again, I'm very hesitant. I'm learning that I have to be more open if I want to start applying the programs. And if something's similar, then I'm gonna have to change it, that it's a little different. And that's the other thing is there are a lot of similar stories. I'm like, okay, how do I change it and twist it so that it's something that represents me I want to tell? But again, I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable. I know eventually I'll probably have to be comfortable enough to share them. But again, I'm trying to figure out like who can I trust? Like who can I trust enough that won't take it and decide to make their own things? Because there's stories out there. People have shared their stories. They've gotten them taken and then they go make, these big budget films and people are like, well, that was my story, but I can't do anything about it because these people are higher up than I am. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Ramona?
Well, I'll tell you right now, like if you write a story or you have an original concept or a screenplay, you should copyright it immediately and send it to the copyright office. It's cost $70. You can fill out your form online, send it in, and do it because it protects you. So if you send your film or you send your script into a competition or a funding source or whatever, you'll always have that original manuscript that you wrote on file with the copyright office in DC. So don't be afraid, but definitely don't be afraid to send 60 books and get your copyright done because it's worth it. Also, there's a poor man's copyright where you can put whatever project you're working on, whatever draft screenplay you have, put it in an envelope and mail it to yourself. And don't open it. When it comes to you, leave it in the drawer and it'll be sealed inside that package with a date on it. And if anybody ever steals your story, you can pull that out and you have a date, you have a way to prove it. But if you go through the trademark office or the copyright office, there's no way they can get around that. You can concept your you can make sure and submit your concept immediately. So I would do that. On that same note, I don't tell anybody anything because nobody can be trusted. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, everything. I mean, we have to apply. We have to tell people the documentary that we're working on. But I think it's different in documentary because nobody can steal your story, right? Because you're the only one that's on the ground doing the filming and telling it. But when it's a narrative story, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. So it's easy for me to tell the story. But like I say, I would still be nervous. Like, I don't ever, like, I have a book. I wrote a novel this past 10 years. Okay, so it's coming out next year, and I won't tell anybody about it because it's a highly marketable idea and story.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody else coming out with a TV show that's similar to my book next year. Sorry, but I don't. And so I won't tell anybody. Like, I don't want to tell anybody about it. So I get that though, because you know, there's no original stories in Hollywood. They're always ripping somebody off. If it's not somebody, they're telling, like we're doing Wonder Woman again or Charlie's Angels, or it's rehashing the same crap over and over. So yeah,
Right.
So be very careful about who you share. I totally agree with that. Don't be afraid to copyright.
Well, back to your point of you don't want to tell anyone, and I get that. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely understand that. But do you have any concerns over you know, other people's thoughts or bouncing it off of anybody? I mean, your husband even, have you shared it with him to look at and read?
Oh yeah, he has read some of it. So I mean, I don't have to worry about my husband. And when it was actually like being written, I had several mentors. Eden Robinson, Ramona Emerson, like all these authors. Even Sherman Alexie was one of my mentors during my MFA program, right? So those people have read it and they give me feedback. But when you're an author, though, I can guarantee you that Eden Robinson and Sherman Alexie aren't going to steal my story. There's some kind of like, between authors, I think there's just some kind of, we understand this is your story and this is my story, and I was there when you were writing that story. It's not like it is when we're the filmmakers. I'm sorry, but the filmmakers are much more, I don't know. So the writers have this unwritten code, I think, that nobody's going to take your story from you. I don't know what it is. I don't have to worry about them. But with filmmakers, I don't know. Who knows what they'll take that original idea of yours, or who knows who they'll go tell and turn it into their own thing. And then say, I don't know her. I never met her before. It's like, yeah, right. I remember that one time when I told you that story. Yeah, but it's too late by then. So I totally get that.
Yeah. Pamela?
Just to piggyback on to what Ramona said, you can also register your stories, your scripts with the WGA. It's like $30, $40. And so it's with the WGA. I've done that with some of my screenwriting stories. It's true what you said, Ramona. Documentary, you can share that. I mean, if you share a documentary idea saying, hey, this is a great story, and if they can get funding to do it, I'm like, great, you're telling that story, it's needed. But if it's a narrative, that's a different story. You're totally right. I've been in a situation where I've shared a story with someone and they're like, that's a really great story. Did that happen? And I'm like, yeah. And I kind of saw a little version on it on a sitcom. And I was like, wait a minute. But did I get credit for it? No. So there's things like that. You just, even storytelling, just like even sharing your stories. I think that's why my circle is so small, because I don't want to share too much with too many people. And right now there's a lot of people that want to be writers and they're trying to get ideas. Even just with comical stories. I have a comedian that took a story that happened to me, and then all of a sudden I heard her say it on stage, and I'm like, but that wasn't your story. And so it's kind of a really touchy subject. I don't like to share any stories because I have some crazy things that have happened to me and I don't like sharing that anymore. But at the same time, the stories of documentaries, real, non-fictional stories, I think it's important for them to be shared. I have no problem saying, hey, someone should, do a documentary about the uranium mines that are closing and how it's going to affect the economy, stuff like that. And people are like, hey, that's a really great idea. And I'm like, if you can get the funding to do it, yeah, do it. It's just a lot of work in real, long featured documentaries. But if people are able to do it, great. But there's ways you could protect your stories. I'm learning that. I'm learning not to share a lot with a lot of people anymore. I think that has developed as you get older. You don't share as much anymore. If you write stories, trust who you share it with, just like Ramona said. The mentors that I've shared my screenplays with, I trust them. I know that they won't share them. They give me great feedback. And you can copyright your stories, and you can also register them with the WGA. So there's ways of protecting yourself. Know who you share stories with. Do you trust them? You can get them registered with the WGA and also with the copyright department. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So Sarah, I know you said in a lot of ways you're a cinematographer, but do you write also? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do write my own work. Also, definitely don't be afraid to register your work with the WGA and copyright it, because yeah, it's like not that much effort for a lot of legal protection. But also my list of people that I'm going to send a whole script to when it's in development is also very short, unfortunately. And, you know, it is, you know, people that I trust to give great feedback and to be supportive of the project for whatever reason, whether that's a personal relationship or a mentor that I just know is going to be respectful of the work. But outside of that, very few people are going to see a whole script before a contract is signed or something. And, you know, I think some of the habits that have developed out of that, I've been re-examining recently, like, you know, forming elevator pitches that have either really, really vague sections or big holes missing in the story so that it is, you know, kind of not something that somebody can just take from the pitch and things like that, that, you know, I was just thinking about recently, you know, that feels necessary because of everything that everyone's mentioned, but doesn't always feel great as the storyteller when it comes out of your mouth. And so that's something I think about a lot, about like what communities we share stories in, and what we hold back until it can see full fruition. I don't think that I have an answer to that at all. I think it's something that I battle kind of all the time.
Okay, thank you. Those are definitely some good tips. I knew most of them, but some of them were new. So thanks for sharing those. So all of our guests have actually had films in our film festival, though not the upcoming film festival. So we look forward to future presentations, but maybe we could talk a little bit about, just to pick one piece, how you went about pulling it together, because we've mentioned purse strings and fundraising here a couple of times, and I know that's really one of the bottom line things. You know, I worked with some film students who did them, and they were doing the whole credit card thing, you know, had supportive families who helped them, and again, even working on low budget things, knowing how much those can just cost, you know, unless you're being real, you know, like Ramona, and just, we're going to do it ourselves, you know. I see these ads nowadays of folks shooting films on their iPhones, and I kind of roll my eyes sometimes and like, oh my goodness. And then I think, but they're doing it. And that's the bottom line, is just to get out and do it. I always remember a quote from Kathleen Kennedy, the producer, you know, Steven Spielberg's partner, of, she has people coming up to her all the time saying, I want to write something, you know, I want to write a script, and, you know, where do I start? And she says, well, get a pencil and a piece of paper and start writing, you know. That's the absolute basic. So Michelle, I think your piece, was it called Light, that we showed? And I may be wrong, and I apologize if I am, but can you tell us a little bit about your process of producing your piece?
Yeah, so I think Sarah said it's her piece. My piece was Douk. So I had a hard time finding funds for that. I remember we started a Kickstarter. It was supposed to be a $8,000 project because it was a historical piece. At the time I was in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to shoot it in California, Northern California, where I'm from. So all these, what they tell you not to do in filmmaking, I decided to do, because you also have kids in it. It's all outside. And I was very determined that I was going to make this film. And so I think I had a hard reality of, when we did the Kickstarter, we were trying to raise $20,000. Unfortunately, we only raised, or got to the funds of $6,000. And if you all know, with Kickstarter full funds, you don't get anything. And so the failure of our Kickstarter was on January 1st. So that's kind of how we brought in the new year. And I was panicking and scared. And I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're also going to film this movie in 3 weeks and we have no funding. But what happened is like I gave myself time to like freak out. And I picked myself up and said, you know what, we're going to get them made. Let's figure it out. So we did Indiegogo. We reached out to all the people who donated on Kickstarter. They all redonated on Indiegogo. Of course, we only raised about $6,000. We got that $6,000. I panicked again because, like I mentioned, it's a $20,000 film, and I was like, I don't have enough to get my crew to California, so I don't even know how this is going to happen. And again, I picked myself up again and was like, what am I going to do? And so what I did is I ended up making this generic letter, and I reached to anyone and everyone. We first reached out to restaurants within Humboldt County asking what they could give me. I just straight up said, I was like, hey, you're in my territory, making this, that's really important. What can you give me? And the worst they could say was no. And so we got really lucky, and almost every restaurant said yes to us. So we had all meals provided for lunch and dinner, and my parents kind of helped with breakfast because they were like, okay, we can do that. And then like I mentioned, the historical piece, we were going to hire someone to make costumes, and again, we didn't have the funding, so I reached out to my school and they helped out and gave us the costumes for free. And then we ended up, the one that surprised me, in my community, my dad and my cousin stepped up and did a taco feed to get all the funding for our plane tickets. And then last, I was surprised with the fact that we got free. That was something I was never expecting. And we got like 5 days worth of hotels, and then 2 days from another hotel. So what I tell people, it is really difficult to raise funding, but it's not impossible. All you have to do is kind of ask. And the worst that people can tell you is no. But as long as you ask, you never know if they're going to say yes. And that's kind of how Douk came to be, was my community stepped up and I did a lot of problem solving and raised the fund. And then the recent project I'm now, we actually applied for a grant. I do recommend anyone who wants to go into filmmaking to learn grant writing. It's really going to help you because that's another source going to help you find funding.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think Sarah was light, and we'll get to that. But Ramona, yours was Mayors of Shiprock, which actually just the title sounds interesting to me. So if you could share a little bit with us.
Sure. The Mayors of Shiprock was actually a documentary about a group of young Navajo students who live in Shiprock and who actively work in their community to make it a better place. And it started out as we were working on another film called Hidden Talents with Nana Becker and a Shiprock artist named James King. And while we were working on that film in Shiprock, I met Graham Bayall, who actually volunteered to be one of our camera assistants on the film. And on the set, some people were talking to me about Graham and like kind of the work that he does, because Graham was kind of the initiator of the Northern Dene Youth Committee, which is basically the kids. That's the name they gave themselves. And I just learned that he, was doing all these great projects in the community, and I asked him if I could come to an NDYC meeting and just kind of see, like what all their work was about. My husband and I went there. We didn't have a camera or anything. We just went to attend the meeting, just to hang out with the kids to see how many of them there were, what kind of work they were going to get started doing. And we were just blown away by how professional they were. I mean, they were like running minutes, like they were running like a board meeting, right? And these are like 14 to 20-year-old kids in Shiprock. And while we were there at that meeting, I just said, would you guys let us make a film about you? And at first I thought maybe we could make a short film, because I had no idea how sustainable that project was. We didn't have any funding at the time, but I just knew if we had a chance to just like hang out with them and start filming, that we would get support, that we would find a way to get funding. So we did. We spent a couple of months with them on our own dime, kind of going back and forth and just shooting some stuff. Like they did a wood hauling thing. They did a couple of community efforts, and so we filmed it. And we got initial funding during that time from Vision Maker Media, which is the Native American arm of the PBS consortia. So they gave us R&D funding, which was, I believe, $15,000. and we were able to complete a trailer and start production. Because you know, we don't really do pre-production. We just jump right in. We'll start filming, and then get the pre-production funding, and then we'll call it production. But we've already been filming, so that's how it went. And unfortunately, that film took like 5 years to make. So we watched these kids grow up from the time they were in high school until some of them were becoming parents. I mean, literally, we watched them grow up, and it became quite an opus. And originally, it was supposed to just be about Graham Bale, and Graham, halfway through the film, asked me not to. It was supposed to be called The Mayor of Shiprock, because that's what I called Graham, because he's the one that fronted this whole youth committee. But he just took us aside halfway through the production and said, "I'm not comfortable being the center of this film. This is about us, not about me, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the person in charge." And so we completely changed the entire production. Everything shifted from Graham to everyone, because Graham asked us to, and we're telling their story, and they're part of the decision-making process. So, you know, we did, and it made it a better film. We were able to follow a lot of kids. We were able to follow impacts on several different character storylines. So, you know, we were able to go back to Vision Maker with that trailer, and we got additional funding. So that, I believe altogether we got maybe $105,000 to make that film for 5 years. And if anybody understands budgets, that's nothing. We could not get post-production funding to save our lives. I tried ITVS 8 times. I got denied 8 times from ITVS for post-production funding. It's just ridiculous. So I just taught myself how to edit, and we just did it. And we got our local PBS station here to help me with color grading and sound design. They taught me how to do it. I had to take my whole unit down to the station and sat there for a week, and they taught me how to color grade, and they taught me how to mix the audio, and I did it. Now I can do it here in my living room, right? So it's just a matter of, like, you can't wait for people to be like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can give you 10 grand. Get that, right? Get that. It takes too long. Just go learn. Get on YouTube. Go learn how to do it. Just do it. Just do it, because you don't have, you know, a lot of times on these docs, you don't have time to wait another 6 months for funding to come around. So you just got to go do it. You just got to learn how to do it. Find a friend that knows how to do it. Pay them a little bit of money to help you out, whatever it is, you know. And Melissa Henry is actually the one who taught me how to edit, because she helped me edit the trailer for Mirrors at Shiprock, and she was like, "Watch what I do, and you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out in no time." And I did. It was easy. So, you know, if you really want to tell the story bad enough, you'll do it. And even if it takes 6 years, I've never been so proud of a film. And it wasn't because I think I'm just like some exquisite filmmaker. No, it was because we were able to tell a story that changes the narrative. We told a positive story that didn't have any alcoholism, we didn't have any poverty, all the things they wanted us to put in there so we could get post-production funding. Yeah. Right? Because that's what they want. They want that poverty porn. And if you're not willing to dole it out, they're not going to give you any money for it. So they can keep their money. We're not going to make that film, right? We wanted to make a film that had a narrative structure that was in a circle, which is really Navajo, but nobody got it. Nobody was like, I don't understand. Why do we have to come back? It's like, you don't get it. That's why we're not waiting 6 months to find out if you're going to fund us, because it's a waste of time. So a lot of the time, film funding structures are just counteractive to the to film production, especially for documentaries. Sometimes you have a story happening in some funding, and some opinion that somebody has of you in 2 states over is not going to affect that story being told. So for all these doc filmmakers out there, you got to just keep going, even though you're going to wait 6 months to find out if you're going to get funding. Don't wait. Your story won't wait, so why should you?
But tell us how you really feel, Ramona.
I'm sorry?
I said, but tell us how you really feel.
I know.
No,
I kind of get like that.
Oh,
it's because I'm getting older. Like, there's no filter anymore. Like, I just don't give a crap.
I feel like that's the place you have to be to just do it. Anything, really, you know, whatever you're doing that you're passionate about, you just have to pursue it. So thank you. Appreciate that. Pamela, yours was Legacy of Exiled Indians. Again, a great title. So you could share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to add on to what Ramona was saying. I worked on 2 documentaries where I was hired as a producer, and I had to quit because the filmmaker really was keen on sharing this alcohol, poverty porn, reservation theme. And I kept saying, no, you don't need to tell that story. You need to tell this story because you have it here. And we kept going back and forth. And then finally, I just had to tell them, I have to step out. I can't be part of this. And I've done that twice. And it's sad and unfortunate, but they don't listen to us. They're talking about my fucking community and they won't listen to us. So sorry to be so abrasive about that, but I'm just tired of it. I think also just with the age, I'm just like, you know what? Fuck you guys. I'm sorry. But going back to my short film, I did that on my own. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have any money, but I had this great idea that I wanted to do this story. I've been wanting to do that story, talking about relocation of American Indians to Los Angeles for a long time. And then when I saw the Exiles, I was like, okay, this is my huge sign that's telling me that I got to do this story. So I just worked on a couple, like, I guess, YouTube, like series, like little, not podcasts, I forgot what they call them. With a friend of mine, she did this little series called Ask a Slave, and she ended up getting a lot of attention from it. And from her doing that with a budget of only $4,000 and getting the notoriety she did to tell that important story, she really helped me, and she kept telling me, you need to do your story now. So it was kind of all these signs like pushing me to tell my story. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? I don't even have a camera. I don't have people. And it's hard for me to explain this to people because people didn't understand the narrative of relocation of American Indians to Los Angeles. So I had to really share that story. I had to start from scratch. Okay, there's these policies that happen. So I just started a GoFundMe. I didn't know about GoFundMe at that time until I worked on this web series. That's what it's called. This web series, and she helped me. Her husband at the time, he was a photographer, and it was initially going to come out as a photo essay, and then it grew into a short film, and it's continuing to be shared about the history about American Indians coming to Los Angeles through the Indian policy programs of relocation from 1956. And it's expanded, and it has longevity, and it has grown, continuing to grow today, that I had no idea that it would, because it has the history of Los Angeles. It has American Indians, relocation stories. It talks about policies. It talks about the imagery of who we are. And it most importantly tells our story. And I'm telling the story because I'm Native. My parents were part of the relocation program. It's rooted into so many people that live here that they don't even understand. And I really wanted our youth to understand their existence of being in this metropolitan city. And also, I saw that our stories were never really shared on PBS. All these migration stories were being told from the African-American, experience, the Korean, the Armenian, but you would never really hear anything about American Indians. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I got to do it, because if if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And, you know, if I can just do the story and someone else can come down and continue to tell the story, I'm happy. Because it is, I think we have the ability to continue to tell our stories as Native people. And there's so many stories. I'm just a small portion of a storyteller. I'm not the Native American storyteller. I'm a small portion of that. So I guess just believing in yourself and the passion that you have as a storyteller just to do it. And I was lucky that I got a lot of people that, you know, really were wanting to support me. I hired my DP. I had a friend who bought all the wardrobe. I had a friend who just did a book about the history of Los Angeles. So I got all the waivers to take and film at these locations in Los Angeles. And I was scared to death when I called a realtor and he's like, oh yeah, we need $1 million for insurance at all the locations. And I'm like, I don't have that. And I just had to ask my friend, I'm like, is there any way you can talk to him? And I don't know what he said to him, but it was all taken care of. So I knew how I needed to go about making sure that things were done in the right way on a small scale of a budget. It can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So Sarah, your film was light, and I understand it was a sci-fi short. Can you tell us about that project?
Yeah, going into light in development, actually what Ramona mentioned earlier, the circular story narrative was always one of the most important things going into that project. And that short is a post-apocalyptic retelling of an old Cherokee story that I grew up hearing. And so I wanted to put that idea on screen of this story that has been with us and will continue to be with us for a long time. And so for me, that, you know, existed in a sci-fi space. And you know, it's only a 12-minute film, but sci-fi is expensive. So it was about, I think after everything, it ended up being about a $13,500 short. And, you know, that's a significant amount of money to raise. Again, to repeat what Michelle said, the importance of being able to write a grant. About, I think 7,000 came from a singular grant source, and that really kicked off everything else. But even with that first grant, it didn't happen overnight. And so we actually went into the week before production started, we had I think 8,000 total of that budget. And so we made the really terrifying decision at the time to split the shoot in half. So we actually only shot half of the film at first, and then took it back to the editing room to get the pieces that work together, and went back out to fundraise the second half of it. And then we ended up shooting that 3.5 months later. So that's kind of how the fiscal journey of that movie came together. And yeah, especially the sci-fi aspect, it's a little sci-fi actiony too, you know, so there are some moments that I shot months apart that exist within a split second on screen. And it really was terrifying, but it was the best decision for the project, because I'm not sure if it would have been finished at all if we hadn't, you know, stepped into production when we could.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And again, like I said earlier, we look forward to future work from you ladies and hope that we'll be able to see some more of that down the road. Let's get a little close to wrapping up here. Is there anything you'd just like to share with us about your journey as an Indigenous woman in film that maybe you've learned that's come to for lack of a better term, maybe define you? I will say that, you know, my 10 plus years, you know, a decade in the film business taught me a lot of things. I mean, you know, one thing I found, and I think I heard this a little bit from Ramona, is, people not kind of not trusting your skill set, not thinking that you knew what you were doing. And what was really interesting to me as I progressed and did more projects, because I started off working on native films, native themed films. I got very, very lucky. Dances with Wolves came out just as I was making my first movie. I am older. And, from there, I worked on Last of the Mohicans and some other of the Turner Network series of films, and started meeting people who would call me later on other things. I started to find that the folks who I worked with on non-native projects were more accepting of me and whatever skill I might have brought to the set than the folks on the native films, because the folks on the native films thought I was there just because I was native, not because I knew what I was doing. And at that point, I actually had several projects under my belt. So, it's a little humbling. You have to always, I think, reevaluate yourself and what you're doing. Am I doing the right thing? Is this really where I want to stay? What change am I looking for as I mature in this business? And for me, it was to take it in another direction and work with nonprofit organizations and take those skills and do something else with them. But what do you ladies see in your future, or maybe just some general words of how you found your work to have affected your life now? Michelle?
I started with a part-time job, and what I've realized, just recently, a couple months ago, left my part-time job to take filmmaking full on. But what I've said, it's not an easy road. It really isn't. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I'm now just kind of what people would say starting here, even though I've been doing it for 10 years, because I've, again, left my job to pursue filmmaking. But the other thing is, what I've learned is people will doubt you, but don't let that doubt affect you. Sometimes I find myself, I'll talk to my partner, because I feel like a lot of people have mentioned, a lot of my comments, it's a very male-dominated field. And I feel like men think they can talk the way, to us, down to us, and we're just as skilled as them. And so I'm learning to be more vocal. What I can do, I do sometimes go to my partner and be, hey, am I good at my job? Or he goes, yeah, you are. It's just, people are assholes. Like, people are legit assholes. They'll make you feel like you can't do it. You can. And so, again, it's okay to have that moment where you're like, oh, what am I doing? And then pick yourself up and be like, no, I'm really skilled. I know what I'm doing. Don't let these people bother you, and speak up. The other thing I'm getting very comfortable is telling people who are not native to not tell our stories. I have all sorts of people come and they're like, oh, how do you feel about natives? And when I first started, when I moved to LA, I was trying to be very careful because I'm trying to make these relationships and stuff. And now I'm just like, don't do it. I'm like, there are stories. We know how to tell them. And I know Ramona said trauma, that's what they're looking for. They're constantly looking for trauma porn. They want those stories of us down on our luck, us being alcoholics, us living on a reservation. We're all very different. And I think that's what people don't realize. I grew up on the res when I was 11. I lived in Central California. Then I moved to a reservation at 11. And I have a very different experience. I have very different stories. I'm also a California native, a North Coast California native. So I can relate to my tribe, but I can't relate to everyone else because we're all very different. I think people don't realize that. What I'm saying is, if you're not native, please don't tell our story. It's not your job, it's ours to tell those. And we know how to tell them in a different perspective. I know that right now, currently, there's a lot of white men telling our story. And my husband, who happens to be a white male, hears it from me all the time. Because I'm like, look, I don't want to see another stereotypical story about us in the past. And also, I'm not going to mention the story that I'm talking about right now, because I do have some friends on that film. But the thing is, you could have brought a native director to tell that story. It doesn't have to be a white male. Or you could have co-directed. I don't know. There's this thing in this industry where co-directing is like a no-no. And I straight up bullshit. I love co-directing because then I can mentor someone who may not have the strength that I have, but we can grow together. And so I think that's the thing, is we need to be more vocal and straight up telling people, don't tell our stories. And also don't fund that project. And that's the thing I'm learning. Sorry, like I get kind of passionate because I get so frustrated. But the thing I'm learning is when I see Native story, I'm very hesitant to go watch it because I want to see who was on that crew. Of, you know, BIPOC friends who will be like, oh, have you seen this movie? And I'm like, oh, I've read about it, but let me check it. Then I'll realize only Indigenous people are the actors and everybody else was non-Native. So why do you have the right to tell that story? But yeah, I don't know. I'm becoming more vocal. I'm more comfortable straight up saying it's not your story.
That's good. That's good. Keep saying that. You have to. Ramona?
Yes, please keep saying that. That's that's like my biggest pet peeve. And I've been known around here for calling white people out, because that happens a lot here in New Mexico. There's certain production companies here in New Mexico that make their living on telling stories about Pueblo people. And it boggles the mind. Not only the fact that they think they have the right to tell that story and that story is theirs, but that the Pueblo people let them tell it. So, like, when you're voicing that opinion, part of that voicing that opinion is also educating our own people. I know a lot of our people are so desperate to have their story told, so desperate to have a camera there to tell their story, even if it's a bunch of white people, that they don't think about that. And so a lot of the things that I like to do is talk to people who are getting involved in these kind of projects and say, yeah, but who are these people that are telling your story? Are they part of your community? Do they belong here? You're going to be sharing very personal things with them. Do you feel comfortable with that? But mostly when you do that, especially someplace like here in New Mexico with such a tight knit local community, you get blacklisted pretty quick. And I learned that the hard way by calling people out at Indian Market and saying, yo, everyone else here showing art, making pottery, doing jewelry, has to show their Indian card and has to prove that they come from the communities that they're claiming. But yet these white people can come in and make a film about Native veterans and they can come in and win prize money. And their thing is that, oh, but we have 2 Native people who are associate producers, not above the line, people, not above the line. I got called out several times for being racist or being a sore loser because my film was also in competition with them. So we had to pull our film from competition because people were calling us sore losers. I couldn't get a job for 2 years after that because these people were talking trash about me who had no idea who I was except for the fact that I told them, hey, you're 3 rich white people who are taking advantage of all these Pueblo people. But, because of who they're friends with and because of all the other politics and politics around all of that, I'm the bad one, right? So I don't care. Santa Fe sucks anyway, so they can, whatever. They can all talk trash about me around a circle and eat cookies. I really don't care. But that is so important. The fact that you tell your own stories and that you continue to make sure that these stories are told by people in our communities. So a lot of my work moving forward has been really with that and for advocating. I am a part of the Governor's Council on Film and Media Industries. And since I'm the only Native person on that committee to the governor, that's been my main thing, is like, how are we providing opportunities to the Native communities? People are filming in Pueblos and tribal communities on reservations. How are we economically impacting those communities? How many filmmakers are coming out of that? How many people are we mentoring? How many jobs are we creating? You can't just bring white crews into the Navajo Nation and make films and not hire any Navajo people. Yeah. Like, that's wrong. You can't stop hiring all these other actors to play Navajos. Like, there are actual Navajos here in acting school who are doing a good job, who would love to be hired. We don't need to see Adam Beach be Navajo anymore. Like, these are all things that we have to advocate for. And so constantly, as part of where I am at as far as my career, that is what I work mostly on. Advocating for our communities, advocating for independent filmmakers who are doing work here in our state, and to make sure that we're getting funding and we're getting support, because there's a lot of production companies here that are taking advantage of tax incentives and taking advantage of financial issues here on our state. They need to give back. They need to put money back into the Native community. So that's really where it is. we are working currently on 5 separate documentary projects, and I have no pre-production going forward, which means like they always say you should keep several projects on the burners at different stages of production, and we're at that point now. But I have no next step. I have not planning on making another documentary because I am too old to be carrying around all that equipment and hauling around stuff all over the place. Like, I'm done. I'm done doing that. I'm burnt out, and I think it's just we're going to finish this docuseries, and we're going to finish these 3 short docs, and then I don't know if I'm going to make another film because the industry is just getting worse and worse, and I don't see any support. The gatekeepers continue to be the same people, and now they're just getting higher and higher and higher, and it's just sick. It's gross. It's like nothing's ever changing, and I just feel like I hope my novel does well next year, because if it does, I want to just write. I am so tired of the people in the film industry.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Well, good luck. Maybe you could make a film on your iPhone.
Oh, I'm already doing that.
That's much lighter than a camera.
Oh yeah, and they have great gimbals now, and there's all kinds of stuff in 4K. There's no reason why you can't use your iPhone, except you have bad audio. That's the only thing. But the visuals are really nice.
Yeah, they keep playing ads for it on my little game that I play on my phone, so I keep seeing that. Anyway, Pamela, your thoughts?
The independent film Tangerine was all done on an iPhone, and it was a great film. I think now that I'm older, I'm kind of with Ramona. I'm unapologetic to a lot of people, and I totally can hear you, Ramona, about the gatekeepers and about the same people in that, group. It's just really sad because I feel like sometimes when I try to share my stories, because people are like, "Oh, well, you're multimedia. What do you?" When they hear about Legacy of Exiled NDNs, they're like, "Well, what other projects do you have?" And I said, "Oh, I have a lot." And when I want to share them, they don't want to hear it, and they push me off. And they said, "Hey, have you applied to?" the Sundance program? Have you applied to this Native program, to that Native program? And I'm just like, oh, you're not really interested in my stories. You are just trying to make a conversation to try to make yourself look like you're supporting the Native voice, but you're really not. And that's the frustration that I have. And I really hate the fact that Hollywood is throwing around diversity like it's a new trend. Diversity really just means we're just going to help them. It's just lip service. Diversity doesn't mean anything at all. It's just something that they're saying that they're going to help people of color, but in reality, they're not. It's all PR. And I've learned that. And I wish people would understand that. And it's really difficult because, when people always say, oh, well, Native American filmmaking, Native American voices has really changed a lot. And I said, actually, it hasn't. It really hasn't. The reality is it's still the same. We have a little bump that's happening right now, but that bump's going to fade out in a couple of years, unfortunately. But the good thing, I have to be optimistic about this. The good thing is that we do have social media. We do have iPhones. We do have YouTube. We do have TikTok. We have these independent services where people can share their stories and can get the video storytelling that they want. And it's good right now because a lot of people just want really quick, short stories because of TikTok, because of YouTube and Instagram. They want short stories that people can tell. That's why all these like independent like media outlets like God, I can't think right now. Oh my gosh, I can't think right now. But there's a lot of them that just have these short video segments. and storytelling. And I've done video for them, like when they took down, the Columbus Day here in Los Angeles. They said, can we get some footage and we'll buy it from you? And I said, absolutely. So they did this whole footage about Columbus Day in like a 2-minute segment. Al Jazeera and stuff like that. Those are what people want to watch because they're on social media. They just want to watch quick stories. And if they want to learn more, then yes, they'll go and click and find a little more information about it. People don't want to go to the theaters that much anymore. They want to stay home and watch movies at home. We have the capability of just doing our own storytelling. And I think that's what I've learned throughout the years now is I'm not afraid to share the stories anymore. I'm not afraid to like create in different avenues. I've just learned that there's going to be gatekeepers there. I've, just like Ramona, I probably have like said some things vocally really to help support our Native voices that people do not hear it. They just feel like, oh, you're tarnishing our ability for me to climb up that ladder. It's not for us. It's for an individual to climb up that ladder that I seem to have tarnished. And it's sad that we don't support each other in that sense. A couple years ago, they did this really bad series, and I was really vocal about it, called Chambers. It was on Netflix, and it was really badly done. And I hate the fact of how Native American culture was represented in. But everyone kept saying, oh, you need to support it because there's Native people in it. And I said, no, I will support a project that's good, not just because there's Native people in it. If it's a good story and it's good, good representation, and there's production where they've really worked with the Native community, yes, I can support that. But it has to be a good story. I just can't support things just because there's a Native person in it anymore. And I think that's what we have to do is we need to support good Native stories. And with the objective of really wanting people to work with the Native community and really uplift these Native stories. I think, I think more importantly, that's needed in the film industry. I really am tired of telling people and telling studios that have emailed me, call me, wanting me to give them the stamp of approval that their story is legit, and I can't. And I don't care now that they're trying to like throw me money, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to be your pawn to get your stamp of approval just because it has a Native content in it. But there's people out here that will do that, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay.
And, you probably have been hearing this since the early 90s, so it still continues today.
It does indeed, yeah. Some things never change, although I think the quality has changed to some degree. We're making a few inroads there. Sarah, some final thoughts for us as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think what Pamela brings up about finding each other and finding our audiences for media that we actually believe in and that actually represents us is incredibly important. And I think it's we say that a lot, right? That the internet gives us access to each other in a way that we've never had before, which has incredible power. But I think one of the things that we don't talk enough about is how difficult that is. And recognizing the work that goes into building those communities and finding those paths as equally important work as everything else we do, I think is something that we do need to recognize more often. And I think one of the things that comes with that, both as as a creative and somebody just working in the industry, it's an industry where it's really easy to give in to imposter syndrome, kind of regardless of what you do, let alone if you are a Native woman and you have all of these obstacles, because it's while you are feeling those things within yourself and trying to remind yourself of your worth and your value and your skills, there are people standing right next to you who benefit from you not remembering that, and who are going to, even if it's very subtly, going to not help you get over that, right? And so remembering and having, you know, having the grace with yourself to like feel that when it happens, but then to be able to take the next step forward, I think is a lot harder than we like to give each other and ourselves credit for sometimes. And it's really necessary for us to be able to keep going and to build these communities and work towards the future that we want to see in film, whether or not we think it's possible while we're still here.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, ladies, for joining us today. This has been a really good conversation, and who knows what will come out of this, as maybe we can create a network. Let's be the instigators that we need to be for change here. So we look forward to our next conversation down the road. And again, please, our listeners here, join us for the First Nations Film and Video Festival that will be starting in a week or so in November, early November. And thank you for joining us.